Welcome back, everybody. Today is day 30, which was supposed to be the last day, but now it's the second to last day of our Bhagavad-gītā study or with the Gita Collective for the month of September, which will go one day into the month of October. I'm feeling very purified by this. I'm not just saying that. I know that sounds a little cliche, maybe, but it's really true, and I'm really happy. Anyway, maybe I'll share more of a closing message on tomorrow on the last one. Not that we're closing, because then we'll begin to announce the next stages of the Gita Collective, but at least closing up this month's study. When I look at that picture, I'm looking in my camera, I've seen that painting of Krishna and Balaram behind me. Oh my God, when I look at that. Oh, everything that's this Gita's teaching is just to learn how to connect, right? Oh, and if we can just let go and connect, to be everything, all our problems are solved. Gita's teaching that, and we're gonna tomorrow's the last verses of the Gita are just so clear and beautiful and full of love, so inspiring. But today is good too, and so let's get right into it. Yesterday we heard. Well, let's look at this final chapter, which again is summarizing all the teachings that have been taught. Teachings about whether Arjuna should work, carry out worldly duties as a yogi, or walk away from the world as a yogi. That's one theme. And another theme was understanding this world that we're in. The first theme, we could call it karma. The next theme we could call it jnana. Understanding the world that we're in, how we relate to it, how God relates to it. These three, the material energy, the self, and God, understanding them and how they relate to each other. That's come up here. So it began with this question from Arjuna: tell me about sannyasa and tyaga, right? Renouncing fully externally or renouncing internally, but keeping engaged socially, externally. And Krishna's been moving in one direction on that question all along, and it's got confirmed there, and it's going to be more confirmed. We're going to get back to that question today. But then we had a stretch where Krishna was talking about the material energy, the modes of material energy, how they affect us, right? These are there's three topics. These modes of material energy work under his direction. They play out and how they affect our how specifically it was getting into all our different facets of our spiritual life, how it colors them, and how one in the mode of goodness is doing them all without a selfish motive. That's really key and really important, and it's going to tie into what we get into today, because the idea is that the Vedic literatures are going to give us so much information on how to deal with these modes, and one way that people might deal with them is just to walk away from the world. Try not to get too caught up in it. Krishna's not telling Arjuna to do that here. And he's not telling us either. He's not telling us to go cold turkey, walk away from the world, leave it all behind, break free of all of your conditioning, and try to live like an extreme renunciate. Instead, he's reminding us that the Vedas have already outlined a way to serve according to your nature. And this is important here. We're going to talk about what we could call Varna Dharma. It means the Dharma that has to do with the four different psychologies that people and the occupations people take up to according to those psychologies. This is something that's become warped in history now, where it's used as a tool of oppression. There's one thing, I'm not going to go into a long thing. I would, in one sense, I'm so tempted to, but to go into a longer explanation of how any good thing can get warped, and how there's a brilliant insight in understanding the four Varnas, which have been called now the caste system, which is not really what it is. That's kind of a warped version of it. One thing is that it's according to our gunas, according to whether we're more influenced by goodness, passion, or ignorance, we fit in and get a certain occupation with certain duties to perform. Yes, that's true. but they're also meant to purify us of those modes, particularly if we do them selflessly. But this is another point that I want to share, and this is really important. The four Varnas, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. I'll get into them more in a bit. They were designed to train wise and compassionate leaders. They were designed to counter exploitation, not to facilitate it, but to counter it. We live in a world where our leaders may have zero training. Like we like the idea of democracy because we want that the people can remove any leader that becomes a tyrant. And so they could be voted out of office potentially. And that's there's some wisdom in that. But also the problem is we may not be good at choosing good leaders, and we tend to often choose tyrants. And anyone can become elected without really knowing what they're doing. The idea with Varnashram Dharma was that wise people can recognize people's modes of nature that they're operating in, and they can recognize who will fit into what role well. And from the beginning, we can get trained in ethics. Shouldn't it be that we all get trained ethically? We have business leaders, we have political leaders, and people in the roles of like the justice departments or the military, and people in the role of spiritual leaders who have no training in it all, that no ethical training in it all. Wouldn't it be good if we all had some kind of common ground on how a business leader should ethically behave? That they should be concerned about who works for them and that they have a duty to care for them. And because they're the big money makers in society, that they also have a duty and they will benefit if they take it upon themselves to be charitable and care for others. And shouldn't it be that we have people that are in positions of power, like military leaders or police departments and so on, that they live by ethical codes, whereby the power that's invested in them, they feel that it would be the greatest dishonor and humiliation to me to use that power in any way that was separate from caring and protecting innocent people. Shouldn't we have spiritual leaders that aren't influenced by wealth, that live very simply and so on, and so therefore they're never bound in their duty to speak the truth? And so on, and shouldn't people that are not, those are the three leaders. There's the financial leader, there's the business, or you could say the business leader. There's the political or military or justice department leaders. And then there's the spiritual leaders, the truth speakers. And then the rest we call them laborers, but really just means the employees, the people that aren't running their own business, the people that are getting paid by someone else, that are working for a boss to do something else. Those are the Shudras. And they come in vast varieties. It's not like they're all just like digging ditches or something like that. But even if they are digging a ditch, everyone has their role to play. And those, shouldn't it be that when you're an employee of another, that it should be your dharma to do your job and do it well, put your heart into it, and don't, how many times do we see in our world people working at jobs that they're not at all interested in doing? I know so many times, you're standing in line at some kind of store and the people that are working behind the counter just couldn't care less about their job. It means nothing to them. What if they saw it as their dharma? What if they saw it as a spiritual path and they put their heart into it? Wouldn't the world be working so much better if we all put our heart into our work and lived by really clear, valuable, ethical codes? That's what Varnashram was about. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about it as we move forward. But one thing I want to say is that these dharmas, commonly, they're presented in the Vedas, and often people would take them up with the point, with their motive being material gain, right? If I carry out my duties let's say as a business person, and I'm charitable and I give a lot, then I'm going to get more wealth in my next life. I'm going to be blessed with all kinds of material prosperity. I may even take birth on the higher planets. People would follow it for those purposes. If you were driven by that, then this was a great way to get you to take a step forward and become far more ethical, and give you some good guardrails so that your your material motives won't drag you down or cause you to hurt others. But and Arjuna's thinking, I want to be a yogi, and don't people do these duties for the purpose of material gain? Krishna's going to encourage him to approach it in a different way, with knowledge, right? Do your duty in life, Arjuna. You're a warrior. Do it with knowledge. Knowledge means without any selfish motives, with detachment, right? And then he's going to say, and then he's going to take it to another level and do it as an offering unto him, with love. And in this way, even our ordinary work becomes a means of purification. That's the idea he develops in the next verses that we'll read, 41 through 48, where he explains how Varna Dharma are prescribed duties in society. Prescribed is an important word, and we'll get to that. How they can be carried out, not for material purposes, but as a practice of bhakti, as a form of worship. They can be transformed into this purest thing, which is lovingly giving ourselves to God. Okay, so let's dive in. Text 41 through 44 are just going to explain the qualifications of each of the 4 different varnas, and this is important. Krishna spoke about the varnas back in the 4th chapter, Chatur Varnyam Maya Shrishtam, Guna Karma Vibhagasha. He said these 4 varnas, these 4 categories of, you could say career, or, that he said that they're my system. And then he said Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Guna, which means qualities. Karma, which means work or activity or behavior. Guna Karma Vibhagasha. Where you fit in is based on your qualities and your behavior. Part of how it got warped into a system of oppression is that people started interpreting it as it's based on birth. Krishna doesn't say that there, and he doesn't say here. He never says Janma Karma Vibhagasha, or by your birth. He says it's by your qualities and your behavior. Here he's going to give the qualifications. Let's hear them. Text 41, the Brahmanas are first. Brahmanas, first he says, introduces the topic. Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes, O chastiser of the enemy. And now he'll say them each. Text 42, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work, right? This is how you recognize if someone should be in the role of the truth speaker in society, really, like the respected ones who are there to advise the business leaders and advise the political leaders to perform their duties in life with compassion, right? All the Veda scriptures are born out of the compassion of the sage Vyasadeva. And so whatever we derive from the Vedic literatures, including these varnas, they must be understood as they're properly applied when they're applied with compassion. We need leaders that are peaceful, self-controlled, austere, pure, tolerant, honest, knowledgeable, wise, and religious. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmanas work. So much can be said about these verses. I'm not going to get into it too much now. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity, and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas, for the warriors. Farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work of the Vaishyas. And for the Shudras, there are labor and services to others. Now, of course, this is just a very quick gloss over these. But the basics are given here, that everyone has responsibilities. They're all meant to harmoniously work together, and they're all meant to be applied with intelligence and with compassion. Now, again, someone could perform these Varna duties. Krishna's encouraging Arjuna as a spiritual path to carry out his duties in this framework. You're a warrior, do the duties of a warrior, Arjuna, but do them as a bhakti, do them as a yogi, as a jnani, in the sense, do them as yoga, do them with knowledge and detachment, but ultimately do them with bhakti, do them as an offering unto me. And they will become, the quality that they'll take on will be very special. So the next two verses, 45 and 46, address how Varna Dharma can be more than fruit of work. He says in 45, by following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now hear from me how this can be done. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading. Who is that person? We've been hearing about it for chapters after chapters now. Krishna is the source of all beings. Krishna is all pervading, right? Vishnu, which is an expansion of Krishna. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own works. You can become an accomplished yogi through doing these apparently worldly duties. And the key that Krishna shares here is sva karmana tam abhyarcha, worshiping him, the all-pervading source of all beings, through specifically prescribed duties, through the duties that are suited to your nature, right? Now, Arjuna might say, okay, Krishna, if you want me to follow this Varna Dharma as a spiritual path, I accept that. But do I have to do the job of a warrior? Couldn't I do another job? Could I be a Brahmana? Could I be something else? Do I have to do this? Now, the next two verses address Arjuna's concerns about worldly duties. Text 47. This is an interesting verse. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. As long as you are sincerely trying to perform your duty as well as you can, you will not, and in doing it as an offering, you will not accrue bad karma. Now, why? Right? Why is it better to do your own occupation even imperfectly than to do another's occupation perfectly? And I'll share an analogy for this. Prescribed is really important here it's the word that's being translated is svadharma. So sva refers to the self, and then dharma, which can mean one's duties, one's purpose, one's role. Svadharma means that my dharma is a little different than yours, and your dharma may be different than mine, and the other person down the street may have still a different dharma. So svadharma means it's a dharma, it's duties that are prescribed to you, to you in particular, svadharma. It's better to do your own dharma. Now, just think of it like this. Someone goes to a doctor, and they have a particular ailment, and the doctor considers many things before he gives them the remedy. He considers the disease. He considers the person. He may consider their age, their weight, their past medical history, other medicines that they're taking. There's a whole checklist that a doctor will go through before they prescribe that particular medicine for that particular person. So we call it prescribed. Maybe an old person can't get the same medicine as a young person, etc. So in the same way, these 4 different varnas, they are prescribed to an individual. And there's something in them, in the particular dharma and the particular duties and responsibilities that one has to carry out. They're meant to counter certain maladies, you could say, within that person's conditioning. So, for instance, I'll just give maybe one brief example, because this isn't a whole lecture on Varṇāśrama Dharma. But take a business person, right? In this case, we call them a Vaishya. Now, a Vaishya would be someone who naturally has business acumen, knows how to make money. They have the drive for it. They have the aptitude for it. We probably all know some people that are like that. Other people could never build a business on their own. What to speak of build one and become a millionaire, and then build many and get them all, be juggling them all, spinning all these different plates at one time. Maybe they start a business and they become a millionaire, and then it collapses and they lose everything. Then they turn around and start another one. In a few years, they've built another one. There's certain people that have that aptitude. They can make a lot of money. That can be a good thing. That gives them the opportunity to employ others and to kind of like help society just in that way. But the weakness that may come with that, the potential, you could say their potential, you could say, sometimes they'll say it like this, like their potential sin, like that lower part of their nature that they may be prone to, would be greed, right? Sometimes people make so much money and they still want to make more. They've made more than they even know how to spend it, They may see that there's other people that are wealthier than them, and when they're in their presence, they feel inadequate because they only have 3 billion instead of 15 billion, like the other guy sitting at the table. And so then they begin to maybe exploit their workers, or begin to cheat in the marketplace, or begin to cut corners in such a way that are detrimental to the broader society. What they need to understand, the ethics that they need to be trained in, is that you're a provider. Don't measure your success by how much money you make. Go ahead and make all the money that you can, but don't measure your success by that. Measure your success by how well you provide for others. And so the duty, the dharma of the Vaishya is to give in charity, right? That's part of their dharma, right? Because when they begin to think of themselves as successful by the charity that they give, the support that they give, how well they care for the workers, how well they care for the broader society, then that's going to directly counter their greed. So just like with medicine, say I took someone else's whole, there's more than just the medical prescription. They give you certain medicine, they give you certain diet, certain exercises that you're supposed to do, maybe other considerations that become part of your whole, like, holistic kind of plan. What if I were to do someone else's medical plan perfectly, right? That's not going to help me, right? And in that sense, it's not going to help the Vaishya to try to play the role of a Brahmana, or the role of a Kshatriya. What will help them is doing their own role, because it's suited and designed to counteract their own lower nature like no other duty will. So it's better that I take my own medical plan, even if I don't do it quite right. Maybe the doctors tell me you need to take these 3 times a day, and I kind of only do it twice a day. And they tell me, make sure you do this exercise every day, and I'm flaking out half the time. But it's better that I do what the doctor prescribed for me, even imperfectly, than I do what the doctor has prescribed for someone else perfectly. And so text 47, I'll read it again. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Arjuna was thinking about acting according to someone else's dharma, walking away from the battlefield, live by begging, live this simple, secluded life. That was not the right prescription for him. He was a passionate man, a fearless man, a powerful man, a man that had been living a very worldly life and had been gone through a lot. There was a lot playing out in his head. Again, if we go back to the beginning, the insults and abuse of Draupadi, the many attempts on the lives of his family, so many ways, and the taking over the government from his brother, who was the rightful leader, by these men that really were of a lower nature. He couldn't just walk away and forget that. For someone who had a more peaceful mind, it might be the right prescription for them to walk away, right? To go live in the forest, but not for Arjuna. So better that he do his own thing imperfectly than try to do someone else's duty perfectly. Okay. And then he gives this, text 48 is another very interesting verse. Both these verses really show how the Bhagavad-gītā can speak to us in the world that we live in. I know this verse can mean a lot to a lot of people. A lot of people that are reading Bhagavad-gītā and practicing bhakti, doing their best. But we live in very difficult circumstances in this world. It used to be, take in the United States, for instance, it's hard to be a Vaishya because certain Vaishyas have taken over everything. If I want to say, let's say I have an interest in books. And I always wanted to have, but I also have a business nature. So I always wanted to have my own bookstore, right? It's my passion. I know how to run a business. Nowadays, it's going to be hard for me to compete with Amazon. It's going to be hard for me to compete with Barnes and Noble. You don't find many people being successful at starting their own bookstore anymore. It's very difficult to do. What if I want to start a cafe? Well, Starbucks is everywhere, and so it's very often we find ourselves working for large corporations, right? Finding some space in underneath someone else's umbrella, not really working according to our true nature, and perhaps working for a corporation that we don't feel entirely good about, or doing some kind of occupation that we don't feel is doing so much good for the world, or maybe it's even doing harm for the world, right? But I have a family to provide for, and I have bills to pay. What am I supposed to do? Krishna's going to say, Arjuna, every endeavor, this is a messy world that we live in. Text 48, every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Fires in the Vedic paradigm is considered to be very holy, very sacred, right? And it's very beautiful. It's effulgent. It's right. There's nothing like fire, the way that what it gives, the heat, the warmth, and the light that it gives. It's such an essential part of our life, and it's very beautiful, and it has its special glory to it. But fire is often covered by smoke, right? And smoke is something that's not so pleasant in our lives. It's usually something that we're trying to do away with, and it may cover the beauty of the fire. But he's saying every endeavor is covered by some fault. Fire is considered totally pure, right? But even fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of their nature, O Arjuna, even as such work is full of faults, right? Do your duty. Take it as a prescribed medicine, right? Do your best at it. Don't worry if this world is not perfect. It's a very imperfect world. So these were two verses, 47 and 48, that were really meant to address Arjuna's concerns about worldly duties. And now we're going to talk, he's going to say that if you do your duty, and if you do it the right way, not like a materialist, but like a real yogi, and ultimately like a real bhakti yogi, this can take you beyond the modes of material nature, up to the Brahman platform, right? This is where yogis aim. The ones that are walking away and going into the mountains, into the caves, this is what they're aiming for. And now Krishna's saying, Arjuna, you could do it, right, in the work that's suited to your nature. So text 49 reads, one who is self-controlled and unattached, and who disregards all material enjoyments, can obtain by practice of renunciation. And here the word is sannyasa, right? And we've heard about that at the beginning. They can attain by the practice of renunciation the highest perfectional stage of freedom from reaction. Okay, he's switching gears here. He's just said, you're just telling me not to renounce, not to become a sannyasi. Now you're talking about being a sannyasi. Text 50, O son of Kunti, learn from me now how one who has achieved this perfection can attain to the supreme perfectional stage, Brahman, the stage of highest knowledge, jnana, right, by acting in the way I shall now summarize. So we're seeing something here, and we've seen it before. Think about this. Well, let me share the sign first, because this is going to speak to what I want to share. Krishna is repeatedly in the Bhagavad-gītā comparing slow and fast paths that lead to himself. Okay, I've said all along, right from the beginning, that we should understand the Bhagavad-gītā as a comparative study. Krishna is shifting gears right now. He just told him, don't become a sannyasi. Do your duty in this life, in this world. Do your worldly duties. Don't walk away from it all. He told him how great it could be and all of that. And now he says, I'm going to tell you about what a sannyasi does. But what we see a pattern here, okay? We're going to hear a similar pattern of progression to what we've heard in both the 6th chapter and the 8th chapter, and maybe even other places in the Gita if I think about it. But in the 6th chapter, we heard a description of how an austere, secluded, self-controlled yogi can rise to the level of transcendence, attain peace, and from there attain devotion. right? If we look in those verses in the middle of the 6th chapter, they really describe this in depth, this austere. When Arjuna hears that the description of that yogi, says, I don't think I can do that, it's too hard, right? But then we hear that he gets devotion, right? And then at the end of the chapter, what do we hear? Don't worry, Arjuna, you don't have to be this austere, secluded yogi. You can achieve that highest yoga of devotion just by practicing devotion directly. Then in chapter 8, we heard about how a detached mystic yogi can choose a practice of remembering him by devotion, right? It said they could bring their life air to the top of the head, right? Do this practice where they're remembering Krishna in a similar way that was said, if we go back a few verses, right? Back when we heard how to make your work in this world perfect. The key here was svakarmana, do your work, tad abhyarcha, by worshiping him, the all-pervading source of all beings, through your prescribed duty. So in the 8th chapter, we heard about how a mystic yogi can also remember the Krishna as being that all-pervading source of everything. It went into great detail. I think it was text 9 in the 8th chapter. So we heard about this mystic yogi. He's remembering Krishna as this all-pervasive Vishnu being, and he's doing these incredibly elusive yogic feats of bringing their life air up to the top of the head, choosing the most auspicious time to exit their body, and then travel through space to the spiritual planets. And in both these cases, 6th chapter and 8th chapter, Krishna followed these descriptions with a message, and that was that it's not necessary for you, Arjuna, to become a secluded, austere, mystic yogi. Just connect with me through devotion. And by always remembering me in that way, you will easily achieve the highest goal of yoga. So that's a pattern that we've seen already several times in the Gita. And we're going to see it again here. Let's continue to read forward. Text 51 through 53. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination. Sounds like we're right back in the 6th chapter, right? Giving up the objects of sense gratification. Being freed from attachment and hatred, meaning attachment and aversion. One who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance, right? He's in samadhi, and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful. Such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization. So we're hearing about a very renounced, austere yogi who's let go of the things of this world, and they've achieved this position of self-realization where they're connecting internally and feeling the happiness that is their own nature underneath. He said, one who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He's equally disposed towards every living entity. In that state, what does he do? Does he just merge into the oneness? Realize that there is nothing but him, he is Brahman, and there is nothing but Brahman, and there's nothing but him? No. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Right? So again and again and again, Krishna has been, I'll hold up the sign again, Krishna has been repeatedly comparing slow and fast paths leading to himself. When Krishna speaks about Jnana Yoga, he doesn't speak about it as emerging into the oneness. He speaks it about a path to find him through analysis and renunciation. When Krishna speaks about Ashtanga Yoga, he doesn't speak about it as a path just to achieve Kaivalya without any further description of where that could lead. He always speaks about Ashtanga Yoga as leading to devotion to him. All the different paths of yoga that he validates in the Bhagavad-gītā, he describes them as leading to him. And then after he does that, he mentions something else. But you don't need to do all that, Arjuna. You can just surrender to me. You can just remember me. If you can work in this world and not even be a yogi and have a family and have a house and have a job and just remember me and do it as an offering unto me with devotion. And you'll immediately go to the top of the ladder of yoga. Right? So we just heard how a person can rise to Brahman when they get there through this austere yogic life. There was a term used here. I wanted to pull it out. I thought I had it in my notes. Maybe I can find it quick. It may have been that what I referred to when he said always in trance. Right? I think he said samadhi was the word that he used there. Anyway, I won't go back now, but he was using all that same yogic language that he's been using before. And so now we've heard about how that yogi, they're free of everything: false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, false proprietorship. They're peaceful. They achieve the state of self-realization. Famous verse 54. I'm sorry, just want to pull it up. Brahma bhuta prasanatmana sochati nakangshati samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. That through by achieving that, then mad bhaktim, they become my devotee, labate param, and they gain this highest transcendental thing. Now we're going to see. Tomorrow we conclude the Bhagavad-gītā, and he's going to do what he's done all along. Not only does this Ashtanga yogi do it to achieve devotion, but Krishna is going to say, but Arjuna, all you need to do is go straight to devotion, right? Go straight to me. At the conclusion of the Gita, which we're going to reach tomorrow, he's going to say, actually, sarva dharma paritaja, all the different dharmas I've been describing, you can just let them all go, and mam ekam sharanam vraja, and just come to me, and everything will be taken care of. But we're going to have some incredibly beautiful and powerful verses building up to that conclusion. It's again, this 18th chapter is kind of going back and forth between the karmic idea that Krishna is presenting: do your duty in this world, don't give up your work. The Jnanic presentation that he's giving: understand who you are, your spark of spiritual energy, influenced by the material energy in the form of the modes of material nature, but by taking shelter of me, you can transcend it. So ultimately, that devotional message is the heart of the Bhagavad-gītā and what it's truly teaching. And as we get to the conclusion of the Gita, Krishna is going to be very clear. We all understand that when someone's trying to really present a message, they generally present it throughout, which Krishna has done. And then at the end, you focus on the most important thing. And the most important thing in the Bhagavad-gītā is going to be bhakti. And that's going to become very clear tomorrow. Thank you all so much. It's been a wonderful experience for me doing this every day and sharing it with you and hearing back from you. And tomorrow we'll conclude it. Thank you very much. Hari Om Tat Sat.